Today I'll be giving a talk on pigmentation, especially the facial melanosis. To introduce myself, I am Dr. C.R. Srinivas, professor and head of, formerly a professor and head of dermatology at Kasturba Medical College, Manipal, and PhD, currently attached to KIMS Bhubaneswar. I have about 32 years of teaching experience and quite a few publications to my credit. And pigmentation is one of the subjects. Phototherapy, especially, and pigmentation are among my favorite subject on which I have done little bit of work. Facial melanosis is a very common problem. It is a great cosmetic and has a huge psychological impact. The pigmentation on the skin is because of the melanin, which is responsible for giving the black color, as well as the various shades of brown, as well as reddish when we get a eumelanin. And then hemoglobin, which is responsible for the reddish hue, and when cyanosed it gives the bluish color. And then carotenoids, which is because of carotene, which is a relatively rare condition which would occur in chronic renal failure or excessive consumption of carrots. Of the various causes of pigmentation, most of the people will start their lecture by telling melasma. However, the root cause of the pigmentation is post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation. Our Professor Harish Mohanty used to say, the commonest cause of scaling is post-inflammatory and the commonest cause of pigmentation is post-inflammatory. So both for scaling as well as pigmentation, the commonest cause is post-inflammatory. Various other causes such as lichen planus pigmentosus, erythema dyschromicum persistent, phototoxic, all have a background of post-inflammatory pigmentation, and I'll be discussing more of that in the time to come. The other conditions, of course, are lichen planus pigmentosus and erythema dyschromicum persistens, which possibly is the same thing, although there is some amount of difference of opinion. Some people like to differentiate, but clinically they share a lot of common features. Pigmented contact dermatitis is another subject which I'll be dealing, as well as periorbital melanosis. Pigmentary demarcation lines I won't be tackling over here, but should be looked for when we are treating melasma, because quite often you will find that there is a merger of pigmentary demarcation line and melasma. Pigmentary demarcation lines will hardly respond to treatment, whereas melasma to some extent will. If you misdiagnose and then tell the person they have got melasma and you go on treating, there won't be any improvement. So recognizing the pigmentary demarcation line is important for the management of hyperpigmentation. Then of course we have the exogenous ochronosis, which is because of more jealous treatment with hydroquinone. Contact dermatitis, I told you, can be because of the allergic contact dermatitis, could be because of the various applications on the face which can cause allergy. It could be irritant contact dermatitis, which is much more common. Irritation could be because of multiple factors. It could be because of friction, it could be because of heat, it could be because of the chemical, the alkaline nature of the chemical, the acidic nature, or the corrosive nature of the chemical. All this can cause inflammation, which can result in hyperpigmentation. And some of the chemical which can cause allergy in higher concentration may also cause irritant contact dermatitis. Then of course photoallergic contact dermatitis and phototoxic contact dermatitis are the two other. Photoallergic is like allergic contact dermatitis, phototoxic is very much like irritant contact dermatitis. Same chemical can often cause both. Photoallergy of course is little less frequent, phototoxic is much more frequent. Chikungunya, we all know that chikungunya can give rise to pigmentation, as can adhescence, which is known as Addisonian. B12 I will be dealing with. Drug-induced pigmentation I will not be tackling too much during this talk. These are the various photographic depiction of the pigmentation. I thank Dr. Satish Pai for sharing this image as well as quite a few slides which I am going to project. You can look at this and then you can diagnose as to what are the various causes of pigmentation. I will pause a minute for you to look at the images. Pigmentation, if pigmentation can be considered villains, there are numerous villains in this. Of course, Lord Voldemort is the villain of villains. The fans of Harry Potter will know. And but I will not be discussing about Lord Voldemort. We think that there are the greatest villains are these two, melasma and the pigmented contact dermatitis. However, these two are not, and as I said initially, the villain of villain is Yul Brynner, the ultimate villain of 10 Commandments, and that is post-inflammatory pigmentation. Post-inflammatory pigmentation is like forest fire. When there is fire in the forest and the fire it gets put off either by the human effort or by the nature's effort, and when the fire is over there you will find lot of blackness due to burnt wood, charcoal, burnt earth. Now left to itself over a period of time, if people don't mess about, the forest slowly tends to clear this blackness. Similarly, post-inflammatory pigmentation also should be left to itself, and we should try to avoid pouring further fuel to aggravate the fire, in which case the pigmentation can be more marked. So anything we do to this to aggravate it, just as in post-inflammatory pigmentation can become more, the forest fire also can become more if you pour fuel into it. I have been talking of villains. Of course, a new one is emerging, and now he may take the cake. Some people are light colored, some people are not. For long, fairness has been associated with the fair color, and now this image sort of refutes that idea if people think that fair skin is akin to fairness. And of course, future is not always predictable. Unexpected result is but a rule. For melanosis to produce more pigmentation, it requires activation. There has to be more synthesis of the pigment, and of course it should have more amount of expression because of the receptors in it. To produce more pigmentation, it requires activation. Activation is mainly due to sunlight. Even stress can. Irritation is by far one of the very important and not given adequate importance. And now you know that skin is a huge organ by itself, an endocrine organ, and in itself produces numerous hormones like MSH and others which can induce pigmentation. We know that tyrosine gets converted to dopa to dopaquinone, which can give rise to two types of pigment. One is the eumelanin, which is the normal black one, and the pheomelanin, which is reddish in color. And the enzyme over here is the tyrosinase enzyme involved in both the steps. Tyrosinase is the rate limiting enzyme over here for pigmentation, and I will tell you what this rate limiting enzyme means. The skin of the color, or the color of the skin depends on the number of melanosomes. Obviously more is there, but more than the number, it is the size of the melanosomes, the larger ones, and the degree of melanization, how much it has spread through the epidermis, how much it has spread through the keratinocytes, and the rate of degradation. Once it enters the keratinocyte tries to degrade it by enclosing it in a membrane, liberating various enzymes and try to degrade it. The smaller ones are easily degraded, the larger ones withstand this degradation. What do you mean by the rate limiting enzyme? This is the lowest step in the creation of molecule. For example, if there are multiple hurdles, for example, getting a visa or clearing customs, and if there are multiple steps, the last one is the one that regulates how the activity occurs. This last step is not determined by the concentration of the substrate. That person who is giving the visa or is going to stamp it is not going to be bothered with what a big amount of people are standing in the queue for getting it. He has to go through his routine, he has to go through his checklist, and then only he can permit a person to enter into the country. Likewise, the tyrosinase determines at what rate the melanin pigment has to be formed. This is akin to the rate limiting enzyme of aldehyde dehydrogenase with relationship to alcohol. Alcohol, you know, is ethanol. It gets converted to acetaldehyde. The more rapidly you consume it, the more rapidly it gets converted. However, For degradation, this has to be converted to acetate. This is done by the aldehyde dehydrogenase. Aldehyde dehydrogenase is a rate limiting enzyme which determines at what rate it is going to get converted. And the increased amount of acetaldehyde on consumption of high amount rapidly stays into the body and does lot of damage to the membrane, brain, resulting in malignancy and other changes. Tyrosinase is also one of the rate limiting enzymes. As we all well know that the pigmentation is formed in the melanocyte, it is transferred to the keratinocyte by exocytosis and then endocytosis, and it enters the keratinocyte where it is packaged, and there the pigment in the keratinocyte is the one that is responsible for the pigmentation. So if we are going to treat it, we could attack it in various levels, but for that I will come to it little later. What happens in the keratinocyte is it can be put together, like all the melanocytes can be small and united, or it can stand singly. However, the small ones which are united together are the ones that are more easily destroyed. In case of the fair skinned people, the smaller melanocytes are aggregated and more easily destroyed. And retinoid is one of the treatment which we use, which can again break down this melanin pigment into smaller ones inside, leading to more rapid degradation. However, the larger one which is seen among the darker skinned people withstands this degradation and is responsible for the darker color. So what is the difference between the darker people and the lighter people is the blacks or the dark skinned people have more numerous melanosomes, they are larger, they are heavily melanized, they are distributed singly and much more slowly degraded, and exactly opposite occurs when the person is light skinned. Facial melanosis can be classified according to the type of the skin, but pigmentation is per se seen much more commonly among the relatively darker skin. This deposition of the melanin can be in the epidermis, wherein it has a brown color, and if you look under the Wood's lamp, it gets accentuated, and if you look carefully, the margins will be well demarcated. However, if the pigment enters the dermis, which often it does, it goes deeper down, it has a bluish hue or a greyish hue, and the margin cannot be well discerned, and for its clearance we rely on the macrophages which engulf it and then slowly degrade it, take it away. And then we have, of course, mixed, wherein a person can have combination both in the epidermis and dermis. In some condition there is more pigmentation in the epidermis, even in some melasma the pigmentation will be more in the epidermis, and in case of dermis. When the pigmentation is more in the epidermis and when we treat those conditions, prognosis is better. When it is more favors the dermis more, the prognosis is relatively poor. But as I said, most people have a mixed type. And this bluish color is because of the Tyndall effect, where the blue light is scattered much more strongly than the other light, which is why we get this bluish hue of the pigmentation. This is the post-inflammatory pigmentation. It could be following chickenpox, it could be following cautery for the dermatosis papulosa nigra. The common causes of post-inflammatory pigmentation are sunburn. Once there is sunburn, when it heals, there is more amount of melanogenesis and we get pigmentation. There need not be a sunburn at all. Even suberythemogenic doses, like especially in the skin which is slightly on the darker side, the pigmentation prevents or prevents us from discerning the erythema. In those cases, erythema has occurred, cannot seen. That erythema is because of inflammation, and that inflammation, the erythema of which cannot be seen, will heal with hyperpigmentation. And as I told you initially itself, the surfactants, the soap, sodium lauryl sulfate, so many other soap which can be used on the face can cause irritation. They are irritants by themselves. They have an alkaline pH and can damage the barrier layer, and thereby initiate inflammation, and that can cause. Then friction. Most people, they will use abraders, they will use some powders, various things in it for which will cause further injury. Acne, of course, we know that it is an inflammatory condition. In melasma too, post-inflammatory pigmentation may play a role, but again, it is not as in other conditions. In phototoxic, photoallergic, again the pigmentation is mostly because of the post-inflammation in the early stages. Over a period of time, more pigmentation, the melanocyte gets stimulated, and more pigmentation is because of the various other factors, but the initial hyperpigmentation we get following phototoxic, photoallergic is because of the inflammation. Thus, once again highlighting the fact that inflammation is the main villain number one for causing the pigmentation. Then of course, here is a very devout Muslim. He prays many times a day, and each time he prays, he bends down to rub his forehead on the ground. What would happen there? One, he is rubbing there is pressure over there, and then at that time he is breathing and his body will move forward, backward, so there is friction over there, and this friction and the pressure together will cause heat, heat will cause sweating, sweating will cause further amount of damage because of the heat, sweat in combination, and then all these factors subsequently can lead to lichenification and pigmentation. So this is because of multifactorial causes of pigmentation is seen over here. Subsequently, to get rid of this pigmentation, a person may start rubbing. This sort of pigmentation we see in case of allergic contact dermatitis to kumkum. Also we can see the pigmentation over there, but that of course the pathomechanism is different, and here the pathomechanism is different. This is what I was telling you about the suberythemogenic dose. This is the one which we had demonstrated the erythema using targeted phototherapy. You can see how clearly the erythema can be seen up to 300. However, if you see after 5 or 6 days, even 200, even 100, which does not show erythema, can show pigmentation, because that part has received suberythemogenic dose, and suberythemogenic dose, the inflammation of it can lead to give rise to pigmentation. Melasma, as we said, is a thing which is the burning topic discussed on all forums. Most people begin with this, but I chose not to begin with this because I think that post-inflammatory is the one which we have to tackle first, even for the treatment of melasma, and I will tell you why. Often associated with pregnancy, also known as pregnancy mass, but then we see it even before menarche, menopause, even before menopause, we see this, not menarche, menopause we see it, and we see it in men also. So it is not limited, we see it in men also, so it is not limited, but OCP and pregnancy definitely is related to this, and it can be of different type. It can be centrofacial, it can be on the malar area, or it could be on the mandibular area. And then it can involve the arms, it can involve the upper back, it can involve the neck. So other areas also can be involved. So if there is melasma over there and a person says there is pigmentation over here, you will have to tackle that also. This pigmentation could be, again as I said, it could be epidermal, which it is in most of the cases, and in dermal also pigmentation can occur when the person responds poorly. Most cases, as I told right at the beginning, is a mixture of both. In fact, there is nothing known as, possibly nothing known as pure dermal as it was once believed. It is either epidermal and mixed, and in the mixed it could be dermal heavy or it could be epidermal heavy. These are the various treatment which we can use in melasma, various combination. I will be discussing each of these subsequently. But this is the list of the various therapeutic armamentarium we have for the treatment of melasma. What about post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation, PIH? It occurs because of damage to the dermis. There is incontinence, there is inflammation by the topicals, inflammation by the procedures. All this can give rise to the post-inflammatory, and it is possible that all these changes occur in melasma. In melasma, if you see, there is damage to the epidermis, there is elastolysis, there is dilatation of the blood vessels, there is degradation of the collagen, then there is pigment in the dermis, which obviously would have occurred only if there is some incontinence over there, and then of course people would have used lot of substances, homemade substances before they come to you, and most of the people would have tried to wash it away or even rub it away, and that rubbing act itself can cause inflammation, as I told you, and they could have tried various procedures. Although melasma is not primarily a post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation, the melasma that comes to you has a huge element of post-inflammation associated with it. And then long use of hydroquinone can itself can be self-defeating, can lead to exogenous ochronosis, and I'll be telling you something more about exogenous ochronosis as we go along. Comes from the word caviar. This is the exogenous ochronosis. This ochronosis which we see, we all as medical people are aware of the endogenous, which of course we forget because we don't see it so often, is because of homogenetic acid which bind to the fibrin. This is a phenol-like chemical. Exogenous is because of picric acid, resorcinol, phenol, hydroquinone, and hydroquinone is a phenol-like compound. So just as homogenetic acid, this also can bind to the collagen and give rise to the discoloration, and it could be in 3 stages. The final stage, of course, we get papillonodules and inflammation, wherein it is virtually irreversible from that stage onwards. Early if we catch and if we are avoid, but then these persons usually come to us quite late. Fortunately, we don't see too much of it in India. Next, of course, is the lichen planus pigmentosis, which we all see, which is a very disturbing condition. But heartening is the fact that over a period of time, this tends to resolve, provided we don't mess about with it too much. I have seen people getting adventurous with lichen planus pigmentosis. In fact, I myself have tried lasers, Q-switch lasers, and results are extremely poor, because you do it, there is post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation. The post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation goes off. For some time, that area will look little lighter, but almost within a month, the pigmentation returns, and when the pigmentation returns, it often is much worse than what it was to begin with. Some other entities of lichen planus which has a grayish or a bluish hue because there is pigmentation in the dermis. And how will you diagnose this? By doing a biopsy where there will be flattening of the retinages, vacuolar degeneration. Sometimes this vacuolar degeneration goes off and there is absolutely no inflammation and only pigmentation is there. So I often, when this person come to me, I do a very fine biopsy. If it is there in the other parts of the body, I go to the other parts of the body to do the biopsy. But if I have no choice, still I go ahead and, of course, I may not do it now because now that I have got dermoscope. But before the dermoscope came, and even after dermoscope has come also, still biopsy has a role in determining the level of pigmentation and the degree of inflammation. If inflammation is present, then anti-inflammatory drugs, whatever you give, be it steroids, be it methotrexate, whatever you give to reduce the inflammation will be effective. Whereas if there is no lymphocytic infiltration, then we should not give any drug to prevent it, use those drugs. Only wait for the pigmentation to go or try other measures. Whereas if you do a biopsy and you find activity by the increased number of lymphocytes, more amount of vacuolar degeneration, then we can go for the various drugs to treat it. And what drugs are there, I will tell you. So we see the interface dermatitis over here. There can be involvement of the scalp in case of lichen planus pigmentosis. Now, follicular lichen planus, we well know, can cause cicatricial alopecia. But I have seen cicatricial alopecia even following lichen planus pigmentosis. But I have also seen that in some cases of lichen planus pigmentosis, which involve the scalp, is not associated with cicatricial alopecia. But if a patient with lichen planus comes to me, pigmentosis comes to me, and if I see cicatricial alopecia, then I try to treat those persons more aggressively because follicles once gone is lost. However, if there is not much cicatricial alopecia, then we can treat the person with relatively more conservative. The various treatment option, of course, it is a self-limiting condition, So the most important thing is to tell them that this is not permanent. Tell them that you have seen, and then your colleagues have seen lot of cases, and almost all cases resolve on its own. About 20% of the cases I have seen it again person developing pigmentation, but the second episode is usually much shorter lived than the first one and resolves much faster, and patients acceptance levels also goes up, so they are more patient when it comes back again, but that also resolves over a period of time. If there is activity, if the disease is spreading activity, person comes to you at early stage, on biopsy if you find activity, then of course these various drugs listed over there can be tried. Oral metronidazole works well in lichen planus, should be the first drug to be tried out. You could try cyclosporin, I failed to mention that over here. That is one of the good drugs that works in lichen planus. It's a relatively safer drug, and during the COVID period, cyclosporin possibly is a safer alternative than even methotrexate or systemic steroids. Then of course topical steroid, topical calcium, but very important is try to avoid inflammation. Do not try to do any, do not be adventurous, don't try to do any chemical peeling or lasers in these cases. Then of course my favorite is pigmented contact dermatitis, on which we had done quite a bit of work long time ago when I was in Manipal. We had done patch testing, photo patch testing. We had also done with kumkum over there, wherein we found that kumkum, is one which people put bindi on the forehead, very important for women. Men of course also use it, but then once they develop a dermatitis, you ask them to stop, they well can, but women are unwilling. The way to this is made is by mixing turmeric with you make a solution with turmeric and add a pinch of lime, and you know that will turn red, and that is what kumkum is. But if you dry this, you get a orange sort of cake, and you make a powder with that, it is orangish. You can, if a person is willing, in case of dermatitis, you could add some corn flour to that and use that as a kumkum, but it will have an orangish hue, which does not. But what gives this reddish color to kumkum is because of dyes like brilliant red, brilliant lake, and some lake. I am unable to forget the name of that. So the various dyes used are the one which is responsible for the allergic contact dermatitis. So what you can do in these cases is ask them to bring various kumkums available. Kumkum basically is in industry, cottage industry, not very well regulated. So you can ask them to bring various kumkum, and also from the temple, ask them to bring turmeric also, which is home ground, and you could do patch testing and try to find out. And we have proved some cases where it is allergic to turmeric, and in South India people apply turmeric all over the face. So that can cause. I don't know what is the role of turmeric, whether it can cause endogenous contact dermatitis, systemic contact dermatitis, can aggravate. Till now I have not been able to prove that convincingly. So kumkum induced allergic contact dermatitis. In this we proved the turmeric causing the allergic contact dermatitis. But in another study which we had done previously when I was at Manipal, and I was able to get the various dye from Dr. Hayakawa from Japan. So at that time, Brilliant Lake and some red was the Sudan red, Sudan red, Brilliant Lake. These were the dyes which gave positivity. So you do the patch test with each of the various things and find out if a person is not allergic to one of that, you ask them to use that one. But however, you ask them to immediately buy 2 or 3 boxes, because this is an unregulated industry. We don't know what the next consignment is going to contain. Alternately, of course, one can make it at home and apply the way which I described. Here again we get interface dermatitis in pigmented contact dermatitis. Of course, we could get features of allergic contact dermatitis also. Then of course we can do patch test and photo patch test. As I told you, patch testing, how it is done. We could do patch test with turmeric, stickers which the person use, kumkum, and tiruniri. Tiruniri is the sacred ash which people apply. We have even to red sandalwood we have reported allergic contact dermatitis. Sandra and myself, we have reported to red sandalwood allergic contact dermatitis. Cosmetic series, we could do patch test with the cosmetic series, because in case of facial contact dermatitis, numerous cosmetics are used. We could do with that. We could do with the fragrance, which is there a part of the cosmetic series. And dye, hair dye. Whether hair dye causes pigmentation, opinion is divided. For a long time I thought it does not really cause pigmentation. Of late I am not sure whether it causes pigmentation or not. I am on the wall. And then patient's own product. When you ask the person, this person will deny that they use anything, but then the deeper you dig, you will find that they are using lot of products. They will come with a huge tray full of products will be there, and you will have to test with them. Be careful. Do not test with nail polish removers. Do not test with soaps and cleansers as is. You are supposed to dilute them 1:10. That means 1 drop of the cleanser with 9 drops of water to be mixed well, and then do the patch testing. And even then, watch out for irritant reaction when you are doing the patch testing. Then many of these persons, or wherever they go, by themselves or wherever they go, they would have been given sunscreens, and sunscreens, you know, can absorb the light. They are chemicals. They can cause both allergic contact dermatitis as well as phototoxic and photoallergic contact dermatitis, which is why in some people when they apply, they will say it turns black. That could be one because of the absorption of the light, conversion of that into infrared, and that whether that induces pigmentation, or because of the inflammation, because of the allergy it causes pigmentation. I do not know the exact cause, but some people do become darker once they use the sunscreen, and in them patch test and photo patch test is definitely warranted. Then of course sensitized cologne can cause photosensitivity, lavender can cause, so many aftershaves can cause. So you will have to find out a history as to what. Sometimes even other substances which can cause dermatitis. For example, you do it, a person has got earring dermatitis. Earring dermatitis will not be necessarily limited to the ear. It can come to the other paws, cause dermatitis. And you do the patch testing, you get nickel positive. But then again, it is the post-inflammatory pigmentation most likely which is caused rather than de novo pigmentation because of nickel. Then of course, the next topic which we are going to take is the periorbital pigmentation, which is can be seen various types of periorbital pigmentation. Perioral pigmentation is seen, very disturbing to people. Sometimes can be mistaken with melasma, sometimes both can occur together. Some people can have a combination of periorbital pigmentation, melasma and pigmentary demarcation. So it becomes very difficult to differentiate one from other in practice. So you will have to look out for all this. Prognosis of each of these conditions as well as the management to a considerable extent is different. Wrinkling. So periorbital pigmentation is not often pigmentation. Like Dr. Rui Fernandez used to come and demonstrate. Look, if you pull the eyes over here, the pigmentation will disappear. It is the wrinkling, the reflection of the light or the lack of reflection of the light due to a wrinkled surface. A stretched surface will reflect light. A wrinkled surface, a corrugated surface will not reflect light to the same extent, and so will appear dark. So if you stretch it, you will find that the darkness, not the pigmentation, the darkness go off. So if you do some treatment to either induce collagen over there, or you inject some injectables over there to stretch the skin, you will find some amount of pigmentation. And then some people like Dr. Shalil Ponja used to say that if you see many of these persons who have got pigmentation on their face will be carrying a handkerchief with them, and when nobody is looking at them, they will go on rubbing, or they have a habit, they become conscious of that. They will be touching that area, they will be rubbing that area of the pigmentation, and this constant touching, rubbing itself can. So you will have to bring about the behavioral, find out, identify that behavior, and then try to bring about alteration in that habit. So why do people get dark circles? Exactly, we do not know, and when we do not know, etiology can be multiple. One, it could be genetic. You do find that the mom and daughter, or at least when the mother has got, she is worried the daughter, and the daughter will look at the mother and say, oh, you got it, I am likely to get it, so she gets worried. And it could be secondary to atopy. When a person has got atopy, they will have itching, they will have constant rubbing of the skin, they will also develop cata, they will develop conjunctivitis, recurrent conjunctivitis, and recurrent conjunctivitis can lead to inflammation, and then they may use lot of eye drops, various things can occur, and that can give rise to pigmentation, the constant rubbing in that area because of itching. As I said, that is the same thing as faulty habit. Once the pigmentation is there, people tend to rub. Rubbing causes lichenification. Lichenification will cause thickening. Thickening will cause more itching. More itching will cause more scratching, and we fall into the itch-scratch cycle. And of course, periorbital edema due to any cause, due to allergic contact dermatitis or due to some other disease, can resolve with hyperpigmentation. And in many of these, you will find that because of the superficial vascularization, even in melasma as well as here, the vasculature plays, which is why vitamin K was considered one of the treatment for this condition. And shadowing due to laxity of the skin, which is what I said as the wrinkling of the skin. Now, when a person comes to you, I personally feel, look, there are two Marilyn Monroes. On the right one, there is a slight amount of pigmentation beneath the lower eye, and that makes her pretty. And I don't know whether you agree with me with this image or not. We always have doubting Thomases, and of course skepticism is justified, but for those skeptics I have this image. Look at this. What would happen if the area beneath the lower eyelid was less pigmented? A person won't look pigmented, won't look nice. Even if it is absolutely normal, they won't look. But here Sridevi has got a slight touch of pigmentation. So a touch of pigmentation beneath the eye gives depth to the eyes, and depth makes it very adds to the prettiness of the person. You take two circles of equal diameter, make one black, keep one white. The one that is black will look as if it is farther away. That is because the black adds to the depth. This is what the movie people, Brynjolfsson and others in those days, used to use for giving depth, and that factor acts over here also and gives. So certain amount of pigmentation. Why this? Knowing this fact that a certain amount of pigmentation is makes a person looks pretty, because you can sell this idea to the person. Look, you have got very minimal pigmentation, and this makes you look pretty. And once you tell that, it makes them satisfied, at least some of them, maybe 1 out of 10, and then they don't go about messing too much. So periorbital pigmentation, medical line of treatment is disappointing, so only you try to sell the idea that what is possibly a bad thing is a good thing, and possibly it is not that bad a thing. You could try calcineurin inhibitors, which works both in case of inflammation and even when inflammation is not there. I don't have much experience. And of course, we could try, in case the whole thing is because of pigmentation, you could try demyelinizing topicals, but make sure that it is because of pigmentation and not because of wrinkling, not because of vasculature, or not because of lichenification, that the pigmentation is there. And then you could try the melanine. And then fillers for if you think it is because of wrinkling, fat transfer, PRP, all that would do the same thing. I am not sure about PRP, but others, yes. Lasers, Q-switch, fractional, I would hesitate to advocate this, but then we are people who are very, very good, experts, but then very difficult to develop such expertise. And to develop such an expertise, you should have been the novice ones, and you should have made a lot of person worse, and then over a period of time, maybe you have learned to be good at it, or maybe you learn from other people's mistake. But I personally would advocate against trying any of these measures. Then of course nowadays we have facial acanthosis nigricans, much more among the prosperous middle-aged men, wherein they are concentrating on earning, they have to take care of the family, they work hard, and once they come home, they eat, and they put on weight, and they develop pseudoacanthosis nigricans. And of course, they go on rubbing that area, that leads to further lichenification and other changes. Dr. Shyam Verma has done quite a bit of work on that, praiseworthy work. He has seen its association with the obese people, with the skin tags. So here the treatment is the weight loss, because insulin like growth factor plays a very important role. So you tell them you have to lose weight for improving the pigmentation. They will nod their head and go away, and almost none of them lose weight. So correction is required, but then you tell them that if you don't, you are likely to develop diabetes. So in quite a few persons in them, if you do a fasting sugar, you do a postprandial, you do a glycosylated hemoglobin, everything will be normal, but insulin levels will be raised, both the fasting and postprandial. Retinoids can be considered, has got increased the turnover in that area as the first line, but again retinoids can cause inflammation. So it has to be done with care. Various things can be tried, but then the main treatment here is loss of weight and various drugs to reduce the insulin-like growth factor is the primary mode of treatment, which has got a long-term dividend. And I wouldn't again recommend lasers here. Sometimes it can be localized. Then some people, this is one of the few conditions which is very, very heartening to treat. Persons will come with diffuse pigmentation, and you will have to rule out Addisonian pigmentation in these cases. And if you do, it is quite Addisonian, but then if you do a B12 level, you will find that the B12 is decreased, and then you supplement the B12, and these persons improve over a period of 3 to 4 months. When I last gave this talk for the Iraq audience, they asked me what is the dose of B12, I forgot. But the B12 supplementation is the name of the treatment for this condition. So management of facial melanosis, removal of the provocating factors, vigorous photoprotection, pigment reduction, topical agents. There is no universally effective treatment. Existing agents have various degrees. Relapses are frequent. Now let us come to photoprotection. A thing which sunscreen is so easy to prescribe, not so easy to follow. So there are of course slip, slop, slat, leak, slide. It sounds nice, can be tried. Photoprotection from the sunlight is by far, and you could advise hat, nobody will listen to you. You could advise full arm shirt. I try to sell the idea, look, you got pigmentation on the hand, it is because of photo sunlight. You could apply sunscreen, you will have to apply 3 to 4 sunscreens every month. It has to be applied 2.5 ml, has to be applied 3 to 4 times daily, and each month you will have to apply 4, and that is going to cost you 1000 rupees. So why not you invest on a full arm shirt? They will listen to you, they will nod their head, and then they will ask for sunscreen. So human beings are highly unpredictable. They are not willing to change their habit. Change is one thing which we don't easily accept. It's a sad thing. Photoprotection is important, of course, then of course sunscreen is the only answer. It could be physical, it could be chemical. Chemical, as I told, can cause allergic contact dermatitis. Physical sunscreen, especially the nanoparticle itself, has possibly has some side effect, but that is another topic. So these are the various sunscreens which can be tried, which is available, and you must remember that sunscreen has got substances which can absorb light. So it should be stored in a dark place. If you leave it outside, the sunscreen will degrade. Different chemicals will form, and these different chemicals can itself be irritating. So applying that may itself can be one of the causes, possibly for causing the pigmentation or for causing the irritation, because many of the chemicals which are there in the sunscreen are not exactly very stable, and they get degraded by exposing to sunlight. And the sunscreen, once opened, should be rapidly consumed. What people will do is that they will make one bottle of sunscreen last over a period of 6 months. They will apply it now, then they will apply it after 15 days, after 2 months, suddenly they will start applying it once again. By that time, it would have lost all its quality of sun protection. In the south, talcum powder is very popular. So we thought, does talcum powder have any sun protective activity? Sridhar was here from the Navy, one of the smart officers in the Navy, upcoming officers. He's of course a senior person by his own rights, and he came and spent some time with me, and we did a study with zinc oxide, and we were able to say that it offer protection of 1.5. So it is not too much of a sun protection, but it does, because the zinc which we estimated in this was only 1.5, very low percentage of zinc. maybe we require a talcum powder with higher percentage of zinc in it. One of the best sunscreen will be the camouflage. This is one of the camouflage where when we have applied in the case of DLE, and the advantage of camouflage is that it is much more adherent, and if you want the sun protection you could apply it over the sunscreen to get additional protection. And we had done the sun protective factor of the sunscreen, and we all found that Swarna Kumar, myself and Gayatri did this, and we found that it offers of nearly 15 SPF. So camouflage itself can offer sun protection. So a camouflage, especially when a person has got melasma or something, is a good idea in those cases. The reasons are two. One, if camouflage is there, people are very conscious, they won't rub it away. It has got more amount of fastness, so it stays much longer over there, and even with sweat it does not go off so easily. So it offers protection for a longer time. Substantivity is more. How much sunscreen to apply? So there is a lot of controversy. Here is Karthik Prabhu, one of dear friend of ours, student and great entrepreneur, a leader in the IMA, and we did this study with the string using his face, wherein we converted this string into a circle, and then we took the pi r square to calculate the area of the face, and based on the 2 centimeter required, we calculated the amount of sunscreen required, and it came up with a figure of something like 2.8 to 3 ml depending on the size of the face, which is approximately 2.5 ml, which is approximately again half a teaspoon. So when you are prescribing sunscreen, you will have to mention half a teaspoon or the ml, which persons won't understand. Then patients ask me or tell me, I give them sunscreen. I ask them, when I tell them this is sunscreen you use, they will tell you, I don't go out at all. Now that is not true. They do go out, and when they go out to hang clothes and if the neighbor is around, they are going to stand and chat with them. So they do go out in the sun, but then what they are telling is the right thing. They are indoors. So do people who are indoors, do they have to use the sunscreen or not? Like, the other day I went to the rooftop of my house, and from the rooftop of my house I saw the name board of a building, and then I found that the name board has faded. Then I came and looked up as to what caused the fading. It is ultraviolet light. But then ultraviolet light is not there in the room, so why should a person wear the sunscreen? So this is my table, and that of course is the calling bell which I use, which I bought from Nepal, from in front of a Tibetan temple. And on the table, on the wooden table, you can spy a glass which is not awfully thin, which is about 4 to 5 millimeters or thick. And then when I want to remember something, I jot it down on a piece of paper and push it down under the glass so that I can read it, and I flatter myself that I will look at it every day and remember. Once having placed that, I never look at it again. And then when I saw it after a period of 6 months, you will find that the whole thing has faded. What I wrote, what was bright, has faded. How did it fade? That is because of the ultraviolet light. And how did the ultraviolet light come? There is no sunlight directly coming. That much amount of ultraviolet light which is there in the room, which can pass through the glass, which is definitely UVA, because UVB cannot pass through the glass, that UVA can cause fading of the skin, which means that there is UV light in the room, and a person who has got pigmentation has to wear the sunscreen. But then we can make a compromise. What is that compromise? Compromise is the name of the game in many situations. That compromise is pick up a depigmenting agent which has got a smaller amount of sunscreen, and that they can use while they are indoors, and when they are outdoors you can ask them to apply the heavier sunscreen, the heavy duty sunscreen over and above this pigment reducing agent. So we published the sunscreen application, not less not more. That was the one which I showed you, Karthik Prabhu's face, and Karthik of course is one of the authors also. Then what are the various pigment reducing agent? Hydroquinone, which is considered the gold standard, which inhibit the tyrosinase. 2 to 4 is people use much higher, and they get dependent on it. Other substances like azelaic acid, which is both an antioxidant, which is toxic to the melanocyte, which also inhibits tyrosinase, can be used in 10 to 20%. Sometimes it can be irritating, but often it is not. It is relatively safe. Kojic acid again is a tyrosinase inhibitor. retinoids, as I told you, acts at the receptor level. It can reduce the synthesis. It can cause breaking down of the pigmentation, and it increases the turnover, and because there is increase of the turnover, the rate of melanogenesis of the skin can come down. And then of course triple combination, which was once very popular, but now we try to avoid it, don't even touch it. The bar stick, occasionally we do use it. I will discuss little more about it in due course. Glycolic acid, it increases the turnover, can be done. It also hydrates the skin to some extent, can be tried. Then of course niacinamide, the one that is used in the Fair and Lovely, it also causes the person, as I told you, fairness, which is acceptable. So when I find that there is increased amount of pigmentation and I want something for acne, then I tend to use it. Arbutin is again like hydroquinone, which is a natural derivative. Ascorbic acid works, but you require 15%, and most of the one which are available is 1 and 2%, maximum 5%. It is very unstable, but there are certain zinc or magnesium salts which are considered stable. Licorice is again a sort of steroid sparing, anti-inflammatory. Glycyrrhemic acid, which has got anti-inflammatory activity and is a good one, but unfortunately good preparations are not available easily in the market. Then chemical peels can be tried in some of the cases, as can be lasers on the face, but I would be extra careful when I try this measure. So this is the way it acts. Some act by tyrosinase inhibition, some act by reduction of the transfer of the melanosome, some act by interacting with the copper, as does ascorbic acid and kojic acid, some stimulation of the melanocyte turnover, so that the pigmentation, keratinocyte turnover, not exactly melanocyte turnover, keratinocyte turnover, so that the keratinocyte does not get time to get pigmented properly, and then inhibit of the melanocyte maturation, and of course the others you can see over there. Hydroquinone is the substrate for tyrosine. So in presence of a catalytic amount of DOPA will compete with tyrosine, the natural substrate for tyrosinase, preventing the enzymatic oxidation. So it offers itself in place of tyrosine, thereby reducing the amount of DOPA and the dopaquinone. So hydroquinone itself is the one which I told you. In higher concentration it can be irritating, and it can cause ochronosis applied for a long time, can cause irritant dermatitis. In addition to that, the other side effects include cataract. I don't know how it causes that. Pigmented colloid milia could be because of the aging, scleral pigmentation, nail pigmentation, pseudo yellow nail, loss of skin elasticity. Of course, in case of melasma, elasticity occurs even before that. I don't know whether it is because of that or by the disease process, and impaired wound healing are the other side effects of hydroquinone. I am not going to discuss the various systemic use. Topically, tranexamic acid can be used, basically acts on the vasculature. Azelaic acid is again, there is something like tinea versicolor. The hypopigmentation is because of azelaic acid. We can use 20%, it is virtually equal to this. We can use a combination. It can cause irritation, so what I tend to do is, I tend to give it twice a week, and then start off with a lower concentration, maybe 10 or 15%, and then if the person tolerates, you push it up. Kojic acid we have already discussed, very much like tyrosine. Vitamin C again we have discussed how it acts, or the various agents which can be used. Retinoids, we have discussed adequately about retinoids. Sometimes we can even use adapalene. Vitamin E is an antioxidant, effective they say in wrinkling and photoaging, can be used. Niacinamide we have discussed. Numerous other things. Kligman's formula, Kligman came with a bright idea of retinoic acid plus or tretinoin with dexamethasone and hydroquinone, and his logic was that this will reduce the pigmentation, and dexamethasone will reduce the irritation caused by tretinoin and hydroquinone, and tretinoin will prevent the atrophy caused by dexamethasone. Unfortunately, 2 plus 2 plus 2 in medicine does not make 6. So in some we will get the side effect of hydroquinone, in some we will get the side effect of tretinoin, and in many we will get the side effect of dexamethasone. It works, but then it does a lot of harm while working. And if a person continues, means what happens is person will see improvement, they will stop it. Once again it will recur, once again. Over a period of time, multiple side effects. And this led us to do the study on the topical steroid damage phase, TSDF, and which we published in our IADVL journal through the ACAD, one of the very seminal papers which was published joint effort by many of us. And Klingman formula has very little space, but then it is a very recalcitrant case. Maybe you could try it for a short duration or maybe once or twice a week, but then your effort should always be tried to withdraw the drug as soon as possible. Procedures like lasers, chemical peels can have disastrous effect, because as I said, all these can lead to post-inflammatory pigmentation, and post-inflammatory pigmentation is the main culprit over here. And using any of these procedures without inducing post-inflammatory pigmentation is a very big ask, but then there are experts who are able to manage that. So for those who don't have that expertise, or those who lack that courage to go ahead and try irrespective of what happens, we have our great man's approach, wherein we let time take its course, do not do anything aggressive, and then events will solve themselves. That is what we learned from by far the best Prime Minister India ever had. So the take-home message, what is that we should like? In many cases you will find, for example, if an exam is there tomorrow, if you try very hard today, you go on reading till whole night, then tomorrow morning you are not going to be fresh, you are going to do very badly. So there are occasions where you should know how to pull your foot away from the accelerator and let things roll on at a gentle pace. So give time, and if you give time, then many of this will. So do not be too aggressive in your treatment, be very gentle, which is why you will find that many of these very expensive cosmeceuticals work. Why these cosmeceuticals work? Why our therapeutic drugs do not work? The reason is that the therapeutic drugs which we use, be it azelaic acid, be it hydroquinone, many of them cause irritation. Whereas these cosmeceuticals, whether they cause reduced pigmentation or not, is a let us say, I don't like to say $100, it's a 1,000 rupees question or a 5,000 rupees question, whether they reduce pigmentation by the effect which they claim. But the one thing they don't do is they don't induce inflammation, and it is the lack of induction of the inflammation by these products, which possibly is the reason why people improve. But then I might be wrong. Some of the opinions I have expressed are the ones which I have gathered over a period of 32 years, and then one can misinterpret one's experience, and I might be wrong in some. These are my opinion, and India is a free country, and each person is free to have his own opinion. So treat the hyperpigmentation, be very gentle with them. Most of them requires more careful handling, counseling, less irritating drug, and then maybe over a period of time, over a period of time, you can do not believe in this sort of gimmick marketing where a black crow becomes white. We don't want white crows.